candles at Whitstable Court had burned low by the time the words left Marcus Brearley's mouth, and Helena heard them the way one hears a glass strike stone, not the sound itself so much as the silence that follows it. She was 33 years old, 8 months a marchioness, and she had managed her father's household through floods and funerals and the slow ruin of 4 bad harvests without once raising her voice at a dinner table. She had learned in those 15 years that the most dangerous things said in elegant rooms were the ones said carelessly, the ones that arrived without armor because the speaker had not thought to put any on. Marcus set his glass down a half-second after the words were out. She heard him draw a breath. She heard Lord Aldous Penrose, across the table, make a small sound that was almost a laugh, and she understood, with a clarity that felt like cold water, that something had shifted in this marriage. Not broken, not yet, but shifted in the way a door shifts when the hinge loosens, quietly over time, until one evening it simply will not close. She rose from her chair. She left the room. She did not look back, but she heard behind her the Dowager Marchioness say 3 words in a voice like a closing ledger. "Shame on you, Marcus." And in the half-second before Helena reached the door, she registered something that would stay with her through the night and into the next morning, like a splinter she could not quite locate. The Dowager's eyes had not gone to her son. They had gone to Aldous. The evening had begun with no particular ceremony. 6 at the small dining table in the east wing, Marcus at the head, Helena to his right, the Dowager Marchioness of Whitstable in her habitual chair opposite the window, Lord Aldous Penrose and his wife Lady Penrose filling the middle seats, and a visiting cousin named Hartley who had arrived from Bath that afternoon and would be gone by Friday. The room was cold in the way of late autumn rooms that have been heated only partially, the fire drawing well but the corners still carrying the chill of the season. The curtains were drawn against the dark. The soup had been cleared, and the second course was on the table when Aldous, with the ease of a man who has been charming people in dining rooms for 40 years, turned the conversation toward the Dowager. I was telling Hartley at White's this afternoon," Aldous said, reaching for his wine with the unhurried grace of a man who knows the bottle will not be moved before he gets to it. "About the Fenwick business. The tenant dispute in the Northfield. I said, and I meant it, that I have rarely seen a matter of that kind handled with such clarity. You spoke to 3 parties in a single morning and had the thing resolved before luncheon." The Dowager inclined her head. She was 61, small-framed, with the posture of a woman who had learned early that how one sat was a form of argument. "The dispute was not complicated," she said. "The parties simply required someone willing to listen to all 3 of them before speaking." "Nevertheless," Aldous said, and his voice carried the warmth of a man paying tribute, "it was masterfully done." Marcus, who had been quiet for most of the meal, looked up from his glass. He had been at White's that afternoon himself. Helena knew this because she had seen him return, his color a shade higher than usual, his mood loose and expansive in the way it sometimes was after an afternoon in Aldous' company. He smiled at his mother with genuine affection, and he said, with the warmth of a man who means every word and has not thought about a single one of them, "My mother is twice the woman you are." The table went completely still. Helena heard her own pulse. She set her wine glass down on the cloth with the deliberate care one uses with something irreplaceable. Lady Penrose made a sound, too light, too brief, the sound of a woman trying to fill a silence she does not know how to fill. Hartley coughed. Aldous' expression did not change, but something behind his eyes shifted, the way a lamp shifts when someone adjusts the wick. Brighter for a moment, then carefully neutral. The dowager turned her head. She turned it slowly, and her gaze moved across the table with the precision of a woman who knows exactly where she is looking and why. Her eyes found Aldous first. She held them there for 2 full seconds. Then she looked at her son. "Shame on you, Marcus," she said. Marcus stood. He stood a beat too late, the way a man stands when he has understood something half a second after the moment to act on it has passed. Helena was already at the door. She did not run. She walked with the measured step of a woman who has governed her expression in difficult rooms before, and will govern it again. But she caught, in the last fraction of her peripheral vision, the direction of the dowager's gaze. And something in it troubled her in a way she could not yet name. That night she sat alone in her dressing room, with her notebook open on the writing table, and the house quiet around her. She had sent her maid away. The fire had been banked, and was slowly losing its argument with the autumn cold. She dipped her pen. She wrote one question at the top of an otherwise blank page, in the precise, unhurried hand she had used for 15 years of her father's accounts. Who put those words in his mouth? She read it back. Then she thought about the dowager's eyes, and where they had gone, and where they had not. 2 days passed. Helena did not raise the matter with Marcus. She was not by nature a woman who raised matters before she understood them, and she did not yet understand enough. She watched. She catalogued. She noted that Marcus had been to White's 3 times in the past fortnight, on afternoons when Aldous was in town. That he returned from each visit with a particular quality of looseness about him. Not drunk, not even unguarded, but softened in the way of a man who has been in the company of someone he trusts entirely. She noted that the dowager had been unusually quiet since the dinner, not in the manner of a woman nursing an injury, but in the manner of a woman waiting. On the second morning after the dinner, the dowager found her in the small sitting room. She came in without ceremony and sat down across from Helena with the directness of a woman who has rehearsed what she intends to say and is done waiting for the right moment to say it. "I owe you an explanation," the dowager said, "and perhaps an apology, though I am not yet certain the apology is the more useful thing." Helena set down her sewing. "I am listening." "Lord Aldous Penrose has been moving against Marcus's title for approximately 2 years, the dowager said. She said it the way one says something that has been contained too long. Not with drama, but with the relief of a pressure valve releasing. "He intends to challenge the validity of my late husband's second marriage." "My marriage." "It means to have Marcus declared illegitimate and the title extinguished." Helena was quiet for a moment. "How long have you known?" 3 weeks, the dowager said. "I had a letter from a solicitor in Lincoln's Inn who had been approached by Aldous' counsel. The man had enough conscience to warn me, though not enough courage to put his name to anything useful." She folded her hands in her lap. "I could not go to Marcus directly. You understand what that would have looked like. A mother interfering, a mother who has always thought her son too trusting of his uncle, a mother whose objections could be dismissed as precisely that. Maternal anxiety, old grievances dressed as new intelligence. So you needed someone else to see it," Helena said. "I needed someone alert enough to ask the right question," the dowager said. "The dinner was not an accident. I allowed it to proceed because it was the only door I could see to open." She paused. "I am sorry for the method. It was not kind." Helena looked at her for a long moment. "I have not yet decided whether to forgive you for it," she said, with perfect evenness. "I will let you know." The dowager almost smiled. That is fair. That afternoon, Helena went alone to the study in the London house. She was looking for the marriage settlement documents. She had a specific reason, a figure she wished to verify. And she went through the desk drawers with the systematic efficiency of a woman who has organized other people's papers for the better part of her adult life. She found the settlement in the second drawer, but in the third drawer, beneath a folded map and 2 unsigned letters, she found something else. A sealed packet, thick with pages, addressed in a hand she recognized from the dowager's description. Lord Aldous Penrose's careful, lawyerly script, to a named peer on the Committee of Privileges. She held it for a moment. She thought about the dowager's eyes at the dinner table. She thought about the question she had written in her notebook. She broke the seal. The study at the London house was a room that showed its owner's temperament in the way rooms do when no one has thought to curate them. Books opened and left face down on the desk. 2 chairs pulled close to the fire from different angles. A map of the northern counties spread across the corner table with one edge weighted by a glass. Helena had come to know this room in 8 months of marriage. She knew that Marcus thought best on his feet, that he left his pen uncapped when he was distracted, and that he could not work in a room where the fire had gone out. She placed the unsealed packet on the desk in front of him at 9 o'clock in the evening, and she waited. Marcus read the top document. He turned to the second page. He went back to the first. He sat down. He read it again from the beginning, and this time he went all the way through to the final page. And when he looked up, his face had the particular quality of a man who has just understood something that rearranges a significant portion of his past. "This is a petition," he said, "to the Committee of Privileges." "It is a draft petition," Helena said, still standing. "To have your father's first marriage declared valid and the subsequent annulment set aside. If it succeeds, your parents' marriage is invalid. You are illegitimate. The title passes to the next male line." She paused. "Which is Aldous?" Marcus set the document down. He said nothing for a moment. "Where did you find this?" he asked. "In your desk, third drawer." He looked at the drawer as though it had deceived him personally. Then he looked at her. "Who told you to look?" he asked. "Your mother," Helena said. "Indirectly." She moved to the chair across from him. "Marcus, who gave you those words at the dinner? The precise words. Who said them to you first?" She watched the answer arrive on his face before he spoke it, not as a revelation, but as a recognition. The way one recognizes something one has been looking at for years without seeing it. His jaw tightened. He set his hands flat on the desk. "Aldous," he said. "That afternoon at White's. He said—" He stopped. He pressed his mouth together. He said that Helena's father had relied on her too heavily, that a wife who had managed a household like a steward would need to be reminded of her proper place, that a man who did not establish that clearly would find his domestic arrangements becoming complicated. He framed it as counsel. The last word came out with a particular quality of disgust, directed entirely inward. Helena said nothing. "He gave me the words," Marcus said. "He gave me the words, and I said them at my own dinner table to my wife, in front of my mother." He stood up abruptly and walked to the window. He stood there for a moment with his back to her. "How long has he been planning this?" 2 years, at minimum," Helena said. "Your mother has known for 3 weeks." She let him absorb that. "We have 11 days before the petition is dated for submission. I need to know if you intend to sit in that chair and feel the full weight of it, or whether we are going to work." He turned around. He looked at her, really looked at her. with the focused attention of a man who is seeing clearly for perhaps the first time in a long while. "What do we need?" he said. They worked until past midnight. Helena moved through the problem the way she moved through everything, methodically, without sentiment, with the particular efficiency of a woman who had spent 15 years reading correspondence that other people found overwhelming. She knew how to identify the load-bearing beam in a complex situation. She knew which facts were foundational and which were ornamental. She built the list. Which peers sat on the committee of privileges, which had known Aldous longest, which had reasons of their own to be persuaded. She mapped the field the way her father's solicitor had once taught her to read a disputed estate. Not by what was claimed, but by what could be proven. Marcus followed her reasoning, asked sharp questions, pushed back twice on her assessments with arguments she had to concede were sound. She noted this. He was better at this than she had expected. He had been kept from it, she thought. Kept occupied with the things Aldous had steered him toward, kept away from the things that would have made him harder to manage. Near midnight, she gathered the papers into order and rose to leave. She lifted her shawl from her own chair, and then, without speaking, without making anything of it, she laid it over the back of Marcus's chair, where the cold came in from the window. She did not touch him. She simply left it there and went to bed. An hour later, alone in the study with the fire burning low and the papers spread around him, Marcus noticed the shawl. He reached for it. Then he stopped. He left it exactly where she had placed it and worked on until the candle burned to its base. Aldous came to the London house 3 days later, on an afternoon when Marcus was out making inquiries. He arrived with the ease of a man who has always been welcome in this house and sees no reason to question whether that welcome still holds. Helena received him in the morning room. He was charming. He was warm. He expressed, with every appearance of genuine concern, his hope that Helena was finding London comfortable at this time of year, that the house was not too drafty, that she was not finding the social season too demanding for someone who had come to it relatively late. He asked after her sisters. He mentioned, with gentle avuncularity, that her sister in Somerset had a lovely home, very quiet, very comfortable, that it might be a pleasant place to spend the coming weeks, given that Marcus would likely be occupied with various business matters. Helena listened to all of it with the expression she had learned to wear in the years of managing difficult negotiations on her father's behalf. Attentive, pleasant, giving nothing. "That is very thoughtful of you, Lord Aldous," she said, when he had finished. "I shall take it under advisement." She rose. "I am afraid I have a prior engagement this afternoon. Let me show you out." She showed him out with the tone one uses with a tradesman who has delivered the wrong order, but has done so politely. That same evening, Marcus returned with the name of a parish register in Westmoreland. Suppressed, according to a retired solicitor in Holborn, who had once worked for Marcus's father's estate, and who still, it appeared, had a conscience and a long memory. The register contained the record of an annulment, the formal, legal dissolution of Marcus's father's first marriage, completed and sealed before the second marriage had taken place. Aldous' petition rested entirely on the claim that no such annulment existed, that the first marriage had never been properly dissolved, that the second marriage was therefore invalid. The annulment had existed for 30 years. Aldous had known it. He had suppressed it. The solicitor, whose name was Pemberton, and who lived in a set of rooms above a bookshop in Holborn, produced a certified copy the following morning. He handed it to Helena with the look of a man setting down something he has carried too long. "He came to me 20 years ago," Pemberton said. "Aldous. He asked me to misplace certain documents. I told him I would not. He found someone else who would. He paused. "I kept my copy." Helena thanked him with a warmth she genuinely felt. They had the evidence. The annulment was real, certified, and in their hands. They did not yet have a peer willing to carry it into the chamber. On the fourth night of work, they were still at the desk at 11:30. The candles had burned down to stubs and been replaced twice. Helena was reading a witness statement aloud, one of 2 affidavits Pemberton had located from men who had been present at the annulment proceedings. She had been reading for 4 hours. Her voice failed mid-sentence, simply stopped, worn through by exhaustion and the particular strain of reading legal language for hours without pause. Marcus reached across the desk and placed his hand over hers on the page. He did not say anything. He simply rested it there. Helena looked down at his hand. She did not move. They sat like that, his hand on hers, the witness statement half read between them. And after a moment, she found her place again and continued reading. He left his hand where it was for a quarter of an hour, until she reached the end of the document. Then he turned to his notes and wrote down the final point. Neither of them mentioned it afterward. Neither of them needed to. Lord Sefton was 73 years old, a Whig peer of considerable standing on the Committee of Privileges, and the only man in London with sufficient authority and independence to present the annulment document in a way that could not be dismissed as partisan maneuvering. He was also, it became apparent, entirely unreachable. Marcus called at his house in Grosvenor Square on a Tuesday and was told Lord Sefton was not at home. He called again on Thursday and received the same answer. On Saturday, a note arrived at the London house, brief, polite, and final, declining to receive the matter at all. Aldous had reached him first, and Aldous had framed it, Helena had no doubt, with his customary elegance. A family quarrel, a young wife with an uncertain grasp of legal procedure, a nephew whose grief over his father had made him susceptible to misplaced suspicion. Helena wrote to her uncle, her mother's brother, the man who had arranged the marriage, who had known Marcus's family for 30 years. She wrote carefully, laying out the facts without embellishment, asking him to intercede with Sefton on the grounds of the documented evidence alone. He refused. His note was brief and not unkind, but it was unambiguous. He was too closely aligned with Aldous' faction to act against it, and he hoped Helena would understand that his own position made further involvement impossible. Within the same week, 2 of Helena's cousins declined a supper engagement she had arranged. No reason was given. None was needed. The message was entirely clear. The family had closed its ranks, and she was on the wrong side of the line. 3 nights before the hearing, Helena returned to the house past midnight. She had been to see a solicitor in the city, a contact of Pemberton's, a man who might have had access to a second witness. And the meeting had come to nothing. The rain had started while she was in his office and had not stopped. By the time she reached the house, she was soaked through to her underlayer, her hands so cold they had stopped feeling like her own hands. And the particular kind of exhaustion had set in that comes not from physical effort, but from the repeated experience of a closed door. Marcus opened the front door before she had reached the top step. He must have heard the cab. He came down to meet her and lifted the cape from her shoulders in one movement. And then he took both her hands between his and held them, pressed them firmly between his palms, standing in the entrance hall with the cold air still coming through the open door behind her. And he held her hands there until the shaking stopped. "I don't deserve what you are doing," he said. His voice was low and entirely without performance. Helena looked at him. Her hands were beginning to warm. "You will deserve it," she said, "by Tuesday." He held her gaze steadily for a moment. Then he closed the door and they stood in the entrance hall together in the warmth of the house, and neither of them moved for a while. The dowager had been following the situation with the careful attention of a woman who has been waiting 20 years for a particular door to open. When Helena told her, the morning after the third refusal, that Sefton would not receive them, the dowager was quiet for a long moment. Then she set down her cup. "Eleanor Sefton," she said, as though recalling something from a considerable distance. "We came out the same year, before either of us was married. I have not called on her in 20 years. She paused. "I have not had occasion to." "You have occasion now," Helena said. The dowager regarded her with an expression that contained, Helena thought, something close to respect. "Yes," she said. "I suppose I do." She went the following morning, alone, with no letter of introduction and no intermediary. She brought nothing but the truth and a pre-marriage friendship that had survived apparently the distance of 2 decades and the fact that it had never been properly maintained. She spent 2 hours with Lady Sefton. What was said between them, Helena never fully knew. But the following morning, Lord Sefton arrived at the London house and asked to see the documents. He sat at the desk in the study for 3 hours. He read the annulment record twice. He read Pemberton's affidavit. He examined the certified copy's provenance. He asked Marcus 4 questions, each of them precise and answered directly. Then he folded his hands on the desk and looked at both of them. "This document was suppressed," Sefton said. It was not a question. "By Aldous Penrose," Marcus said. 20 years ago. Pemberton can attest to the approach." Sefton was quiet for a moment. "The petition Aldous has drafted is built on a claim he knows to be false," he said. "He has known it to be false for 20 years. "Yes," Marcus said. Sefton stood. He was old and moved carefully, but he moved with the deliberateness of a man who has made a decision and intends to act on it. "I will carry the document into the chamber," he said. "I will present it under my own authority. The committee will hear it." That evening, Aldous came. He arrived without announcement at 9 o'clock and asked to speak to Marcus alone. Helena withdrew to the study. She left the door ajar. Aldous' voice was still warm. It was, she thought, remarkable. The warmth was entirely intact. The avuncular ease, the tone of a man who has only ever wanted what was best for the people he loves. He offered Marcus a private arrangement. He would withdraw the petition quietly, with no public record of its existence. In exchange, Marcus would say nothing, to Sefton, to the committee, to anyone, about the suppressed register. The matter would simply cease to exist. Everyone would be spared unpleasantness. "And the annulment record," Marcus said, "would remain where it has been for 20 years, Aldous said pleasantly, irrelevant to anyone. A silence fell between them. "No," Marcus said. A longer silence followed, heavier than the first. And then something happened that Helena, listening from the study, heard rather than saw. The warmth left Aldous' voice, not gradually. It simply went, like a lamp extinguished. And what remained was something flat and precise and entirely without feeling. "You are making a significant mistake," Aldous said. "I have been making significant mistakes for 20 years," Marcus said. "Most of them at your instruction. I don't intend to make another." She heard Aldous leave. She heard the front door close. She heard Marcus's footsteps cross the entrance hall, and then the study door opened, and he came in. He looked different, not shaken, something beyond that. The look of a man who has seen something clearly for the first time and cannot unsee it, and is not sure yet whether the clarity is a relief or a wound. "You let it go," Marcus said. The manner, all of it. Just put it down and showed me what was underneath. He stopped. 20 years, Helena. He has been doing this for 20 years, and I never. He stopped again. You trusted him, Helena said. He was worth trusting as far as you knew. I should have known better. Perhaps, she said. But you know now. He looked at her for a long moment. The candles were low. The papers were stacked and ordered on the desk. Everything they had built in 11 nights of work. Everything they had assembled from suppressed registers and old solicitors and a dowager's 20-year-old friendship. He said her name. He said it with a voice she had not heard him use before. Not the courteous warmth of their daily life. Not the focused directness of the past 11 days. But something quieter than both of those things. She turned. I have been a fool about a great many things, he said, including the woman I married. Helena looked at him for a moment. Then she crossed the room, and she kissed him. Once, slowly, deliberately. Not as a reward, not as a comfort, as a statement of position, as a woman who has decided something and is done deciding it. The Committee of Privileges met on a winter afternoon when the light came in low and gray through the high windows of the chamber. Helena was not permitted entry. She knew this. She had known it for 11 days. She sat in the anteroom with Lord Sefton's clerk, a young man named Pharaoh, who had the good sense to say almost nothing. And she waited. The chamber beyond the door was cathedral quiet. She could not hear voices, only the occasional movement of feet on stone, the distant sound of a chair being drawn. She held her notebook in her lap and did not open it. Sefton arrived at 20 minutes to 3. He paused when he saw her. The document is in order, he said. I have read it 4 times. The certification is sound. I know, Helena said. He regarded her with the assessment of a man who has spent 50 years reading people across committee tables. You did this, he said. The bulk of it. We did it, Helena said. Marcus and I. Sefton held her gaze for a moment. Then he nodded once and went through the door. Inside, she knew, Aldous and his counsel were already seated. Marcus had been called to the bench. The presiding peer would ask whether he sustained the petition submitted under his uncle's name. She sat with her hands folded on the notebook and listened to the silence. Pharaoh, beside her, shifted in his chair. She did not look at him. She was thinking about a question she had written in a notebook 11 days ago, in a cold dressing room with a banked fire, and the distance between that question and this anteroom, and everything that had been built in the space between them. The door opened. Peers filed out in the particular unhurried procession of men who have done something official and are now returning to the business of their afternoons. She stood. She watched the door. Marcus came through last. He stopped when he saw her. He was pale, not frightened, but the pale of a man who has said something in a formal room that cannot be unsaid, and is still carrying the weight of it. He crossed to her in 3 steps. He took her hand. He raised it to his lips, slowly, deliberately, in full view of every peer filing past them through the anteroom, and held it there. She heard from the door behind him the sound of the chamber emptying. She heard Pharaoh make a small sound and move quietly away. She looked at Marcus. The petition, she said. Dismissed, he said. Aldous was censured privately by the presiding peer. He will not appear in the family's public life again. He paused. I told them, the committee, that I had been a poor judge of the man who raised me, and a poor husband to the woman who, in 11 days, had done what no one in my family had managed in 20 years. His voice was steady. I told them she had told me the truth. Helena was quiet for a moment. Outside the anteroom windows, the winter afternoon was going gray, the light thinning toward evening. "What did they make of that?" she asked. "I think several of them found it irregular," Marcus said. "Sefton found it accurate." She looked at him, this man she had married for sensible reasons 8 months ago, who had stood at a dinner table and said something cruel and thoughtless that someone else had put in his mouth, who had sat in a study at midnight and learned in 90 seconds that the person he had trusted most had been using him for 20 years, who had worked beside her for 11 nights with his hand on hers on a page of witness testimony, and who had, the night before, said her name in a voice she intended to hear again. "Come home," she said. They returned to Whitstable Court that same afternoon. The Dowager had ordered the fires built high in every room. She was waiting in the entrance hall when they arrived. And she looked at Helena with an expression that was not quite an apology and not quite gratitude, but contained something of both. And Helena held her gaze and gave a small, deliberate nod. And the Dowager understood what it meant. She retired early, smiling for the first time in months. Marcus and Helena were left alone in the small sitting room. The same room where the dinner had been, now transformed by the simple rearrangements of furniture that occur when a house has been lived in rather than performed in. The chairs had been moved. The table had been cleared of its formal dressing and held only a lamp and a small vase of late autumn flowers. The fire was high, and the room was genuinely warm, the kind of warmth that settles into the walls rather than merely occupying the air. Marcus extinguished the lamps, one by one. The firelight was enough. The following morning, the rain had stopped. Winter sunlight came through the breakfast room windows in long, pale lines across the table, and 2 chairs had been pulled close together. Not across from each other, as chairs at a breakfast table are usually placed, but side by side, facing the window and the light. Helena's cup sat beside Marcus's. The remains of a shared meal were on the table, a half-eaten plate, a pot of tea that had been refilled once, a single book lying open face down that neither of them had actually read. At the small writing desk by the window, a letter lay open in Helena's hand, begun but not yet sealed, addressed to her 3 sisters in the precise, unhurried script she had used for 15 years of her father's correspondence. It opened with a single line: "I have something to tell you about marriage." The rest of the letter was several pages long. On the mantelpiece, in a small silver frame that Helena had placed there herself the previous evening, was a note in the Dowager's handwriting. 3 words on a folded card, delivered the morning after the dinner at Whitstable Court and kept, since then, in the back of Helena's notebook, without full understanding of its meaning. She had read it the morning it arrived and thought it an apology. She had read it again on the night she found Aldous' petition and thought it something more. She had understood it fully, she thought, only in the anteroom of the Committee of Privileges, sitting with her notebook in her lap, waiting for a door to open. The note said, "Forgive me. Wait." Helena had set it on the mantelpiece where she would see it every morning, not as a reminder of what had been done to her, as a record of how the door had opened and who had been awake enough to walk through it. She picked up her pen and continued the letter to her sisters. Outside, the winter light was strengthening. Marcus came in from the hall with a second cup, set it beside hers, and sat down.